There's a silent tax eating your wealth right now, and you don't even see it. Not because you're careless with money, not because you made bad investments, but because the system is engineered to drain your savings year after year through something economists politely call inflation. But this isn't just some natural economic force like gravity. This is the most powerful wealth extraction mechanism ever created. It's invisible, it's constant, and it transfers billions every single day from the pockets of workers, savers, and the middle class, straight to the asset holders, the debt issuers, and the elite. This is the hidden wealth destroyer, the inflation tax. When governments print money, they call it stimulus. When central banks buy bonds, they call it quantitative easing. But what's actually happening is simple. They re-devaluing your currency, stealing the purchasing power of every dollar you hold, and transferring that value to the people who own the assets inflated by that new money. Every time the Federal Reserve expands the money supply, the first people who receive that money, banks, corporations, asset managers, get to spend it before prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to you, everything costs more. Housing, food, healthcare, education, but your wages haven't kept up. That's not a mistake. That's design. Look at the numbers. In 2008, the U.S. money supply, M2, was around 7.5 trillion. By 2020, it had doubled. Then, during the pandemic, it exploded, 21 trillion by 2022, nearly 3 times the amount of dollars chasing roughly the same amount of goods. What happens next? Prices go up, but not evenly. The people at the top, those with assets, benefit first. Their stocks, their real estate, their private equity holdings all inflate in price because new dollars flood into financial markets. Meanwhile, your paycheck buys less. Your savings earn almost nothing in the bank. You feel like you're running faster just to stay in place. That's not bad luck. That's the system working exactly as intended. Because inflation isn't just a side effect of economic policy, it is the policy. Governments love inflation. Why? Because it's a tax they don't have to vote for. It silently reduces the real value of your money and reduces the real value of their debt. If the U.S. government owes $35 trillion and inflation runs at 8%, that debt becomes cheaper every year in real terms. But that value has to come from somewhere. And it comes from you. Every dollar you own buys 8% less. Your savings, your salary, your retirement account, all silently drained. Let's put numbers on it. In 2021, the official inflation rate hit 7%. In 2022, 8.3%. That means $100,000 saved in a bank account in 2020 had the purchasing power of just $84,000 2 years later. You lost $16,000, not because you spent it, not because you invested poorly, but because the system printed money faster than you could earn it. That's the inflation tax. It doesn't show up on your paycheck. You don't see it deducted at the ATM, but it's the most expensive tax you pay, and it hits the middle class the hardest, because billionaires don't hold cash. They hold assets, assets that rise when inflation rises. You hold savings, a paycheck, maybe a house with a mortgage. They hold the printing press. The Federal Reserve's job, officially, is to maintain price stability. But look at their track record. Every time the economy slows down, they print. 2000 dot-com crash. They slashed rates. 2008 financial crisis. They printed 4 trillion. 2020 pandemic, $6 trillion in 18 months. By 2025, total monetary expansion since 2000 exceeded $25 trillion. Where did that money go? Not into your pocket. It went into financial markets. The top 10% of Americans own 89% of all stocks. So when the Fed pumps liquidity, who benefits? Not the worker earning $60,000 a year, not the family saving for college. The beneficiaries are the same. Hedge funds, corporations, and billionaires whose assets rise every time the Fed hits print. You're told inflation is caused by supply chains or global crises. But look closer. Prices don't rise in random bursts. They rise after monetary expansion. It's the same playbook every time. 1. The Fed prints. 2. Asset prices rise. 3. The wealthy sell inflated assets at a profit. 4. Prices of goods and housing climb. 5. The middle class struggles to keep up. That's the wealth transfer mechanism, not through crashes this time, but through constant dilution. You're told to save money, put it in a bank, earn interest. But what if that interest rate is 4% and inflation is 8%? You're not earning, you're losing 4% of purchasing power every single year. That's why the middle class is shrinking. In 1971, one full-time income could buy a home, support a family, and save for retirement. Today, that same home costs 7x the median income. Your parents built wealth through saving. You build debt through surviving. Inflation ensures that the value of money you already earned shrinks, forcing you to keep working just to maintain the same lifestyle. It's an economic treadmill, and the faster you run, the faster the system inflates prices ahead of you. That's not incompetence. That's control, because inflation is how governments and corporations discipline the middle class. When wages can't keep up, you borrow. When debt rises, you depend on credit. When interest rates climb, you're trapped, and when you're trapped, you obey. Let's talk about who wins. Because every hidden tax has a collector. When inflation rises, the government's real debt burden falls. Corporations with pricing power, energy, tech, food, raise prices faster than wages. Banks profit from lending at higher nominal rates. Asset managers profit from inflated asset values. And the Federal Reserve, owned by private member banks, collects interest on the debt created to finance all of it. That's the inflation pyramid. Base layer. You, the worker, saver, consumer, providing real value. Middle layer. Banks and institutions issuing credit against your future labor. Top layer. Asset owners who gain every time the base layer loses purchasing power. That's why inflation never truly goes away. Even when the Fed fights it, they never aim for 0. Their target is 2%. Why? Because constant inflation means constant extraction, a steady, predictable drain on your purchasing power that keeps the system liquid and the elite profitable. If you earned the same paycheck in 2010 and 2025, your income lost 35% of its purchasing power, even if you never spent a dime differently. You worked harder, produced more, but bought less. That's how inflation transfers wealth, quietly, mathematically, relentlessly. Everything changed in 1971 when the U.S. left the gold standard. Before that, every dollar was backed by gold. The government couldn't print more without having the metal to prove it. But after 1971, money became debt. Every dollar created had to be borrowed into existence. And from that moment, inflation became permanent policy. Since 1971, the U.S. dollar has lost 87% of its purchasing power. $1 in 1971 buys what costs $8 today. Meanwhile, the stock market rose over 40x. Housing up 500%, college tuition up 1,200%, medical costs up 800%, and median wages up just 10% after inflation. So where did all that extra value go? To the top 1%. In 1971, the top 1% owned 25% of U.S. wealth. Today, they own over 50%, half the nation's wealth, concentrated in fewer hands, while the bottom 90% fight over the scraps. That's not free market capitalism. That's financial feudalism, powered by inflation. Inflation isn't just economic. It's psychological. It trains you to think short-term, to spend instead of save, to chase rising prices with rising debt. Because if money loses value over time, why hold it? Why wait? That behavior keeps the system running. Your constant consumption fuels corporate profits. Your constant borrowing fuels bank profits. And when you can't afford to stop, you become dependent on the system that's exploiting you. It's a perfect trap. You blame yourself for not earning enough. But the truth is, you can't outrun a system that devalues every dollar you make. Politicians and central bankers love to say, inflation is under control. CPI is just 3%. But the CPI, Consumer Price Index, is a manipulated metric. It excludes housing prices, asset inflation, and uses substitution, meaning if steak prices rise, they assume you'll buy chicken, so inflation appears lower. But in reality, your cost of living, housing, food, healthcare, insurance rises 6 to 10% annually. That's the real inflation, the one you feel every day at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in your rent payment. That's why Americans feel poorer even when GDP is up. The numbers lie. Your wallet doesn't. Inflation has 5 predictable phases, just like every other wealth transfer mechanism. Phase 1, easy money. Rates drop. Borrowing becomes cheap. Asset prices rise. Everyone feels rich. Phase 2, price spiral. Wages lag behind rising costs. The middle class borrows to maintain lifestyle. Phase 3, policy panic. The Fed raises rates to fight inflation, triggering layoffs, defaults, and recessions. Phase 4, asset crash. Middle class sells assets to survive. The wealthy, sitting in cash, buy everything at discounts. Phase 5, reset and repeat. The Fed cuts rates again. Asset prices reinflate. The cycle starts over. Every generation, same playbook. And every time, wealth flows upward. The pandemic didn't just expose this system, it accelerated it. Between 2020 and 2022, 80% of all U.S. dollars in existence were created. And who benefited? The top 1% added $5.5 trillion to their net worth. The bottom 90% lost purchasing power. Housing prices up 45%, rent up 30%, groceries up 25%, but wages up 4%. You got stimulus checks, they got asset inflation, you got higher grocery bills. They got higher stock valuations. By 2025, the pattern is the same. Inflation cools on paper, but prices never return to normal. Because inflation doesn't reverse. It compounds. Every year builds on the last. Once your dollar loses value, it never comes back. Inflation and debt are two sides of the same coin. Because the system can't survive without constant borrowing. When you borrow, you create new money. When you repay, money disappears. So to keep the economy growing, debt must always expand. That's why politicians promise endless growth. They can't stop. If debt stops growing, the system collapses. So they inflate away old debts with cheaper dollars, then create new debts with fresh money. But for you, your debts stay real. Your mortgage doesn't shrink 8% a year. Your groceries don't get cheaper. Only your savings lose value. You can't vote inflation away. You can't protest it. It's baked into the system, but you can position yourself differently. Step 1. Hold productive assets. Not depreciating cash, but assets that outpace inflation. Equities, land, commodities, productive businesses. Inflation punishes savers, but rewards owners. Step 2. Limit bad debt. Use leverage only for productive purposes. Consumer debt is slavery under inflation. Step 3. Diversify globally. When one currency inflates, others may hold stronger purchasing power. Protect your savings in multiple currencies or hard assets. Step 4. Invest in yourself. Skills, education, and creativity can't be inflated away. The higher your value creation, the less control inflation has over you, and most importantly, be aware. Inflation thrives in ignorance. Once you understand it as a deliberate mechanism, not a mystery, you can stop playing the victim and start positioning like the insiders. Every empire in history has used currency debasement to extend its lifespan. Rome diluted its silver coins until they were worthless. We print dollars until they're digits on a screen. Every time, the end game is the same. The middle class collapses, the elite consolidate power, and a new system rises from the ashes. Right now, inflation is the quiet weapon of modern empires. It keeps the masses too busy surviving to notice the theft. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. The system isn't broken. It's working perfectly, just not for you. The question is, will you keep playing the same game, or will you finally switch sides? The inflation tax is here. It's taking 8% of your money every year. But understanding it, Seeing it is your first defense. Because once you see the pattern, you can stop being the target and start being the one who saw it coming.